Pandemic and the lockdown. Who came up with these terms? The first thing I had to do was change the meaning of these words. I was signed off ill at the time. Instead of lockdown, it became a retreat. I would sit in my garden, which is just right behind me here, and in the sun, everything I needed was on my doorstep. Social distancing. I much preferred the American term physical distancing. I met so many more people during my retreat than I do normally. Out walking on my coast every day, just going, no need to make any choice, just going from my door, chatting to neighbours over the fence. Yes, we kept our physical distance, but I saw far more people than I do in my everyday life now that my retreat has finished.
So I wanted to share with you a poem that I wrote over lockdown, which was based on a dream that I had where I heard a woman's voice saying to me, I am in everything. And I felt in the dream it was like the voice of the earth. It was the voice of the Mother Earth herself saying, I'm in everything. And I wrote this poem because I felt there was so much fear, a collective fear, anxiety, pain throughout all of lockdown, that I kind of felt that I wanted to write this poem as a tribute to the earth, because I feel there's so much love around us everywhere we look in the earth, that we forget sometimes that it's all around us, at our feet, in our sky above. So I wrote this poem, I am in everything, and it goes, mind swirling in panicked fears, lives running too fast, no time to wipe tears. Elders warned this age would be one of great speed, fury and greed. We forgot how to love and care for the mother, hearts filled with hate, fear of the other. Yet deep in the sorrow, she sings to us all, I am in everything, into my arms you can fall. Wars, endless suffering, sickness and pain, mother's voice is eternal, I am in everything, my love will remain. Her love echoes through birds singing sweet hymns, whale song birthing new life in her ocean where she swims. Through goodness and hope, loathing and despair, if you listen you can hear her. I'm in everything, keep all life in your prayer. We are all her children, human family as one. In her we are everything, earth dreams she has spun.
The decision to move to Shetland was huge. We'd lived in Derbyshire for 15 years, had a well-established group of friends, and a good life. We left with their blessing and still remain in touch today. The opportunity, however, was so exciting. We'd travelled on holiday in Scotland for years and had often asked ourselves the question, could we live and grow old together on a Scottish island? Never afraid to take the risk, Michelle applied for a new job and we moved up in September 2020. Upon arrival, we were in Tier 1 and we were able to explore our local area and meet a few people before going into lockdown for a second time. We seem to have had the place to ourselves and rarely bumped into other people. Our neighbours were new friends and very helpful in introducing us to island life. They showed us the best places to find things for our new home, and we never felt isolated or lonely here. Embracing technology, I think social media platforms helped us, as we were always able to ask questions of the community, both prior to arriving and afterwards. I've always loved the outdoors and the natural world. Inspired by Shetland, I began to write poetry and had a submission accepted into this year's Bard of the Bog. I'd always sought to photograph, film and record the sounds of the natural world through the seasons. My memories of the pandemic have been mixed. Excitement, fear, frustration, anger, followed by joy, wonder and an overwhelming sense of reverence. Nature has been my saving grace and solace. It gives me strength when times are hard. It allows me to express myself, and I feel blessed to be here.
Maybe I'm one of the few people who really enjoyed the fact that I didn't have to make any choices. With being ill, there was no fear of missing out because there was nothing to miss out on. I would swim every couple of days at my local beach, sometimes on my own, sometimes physically distancing from other swimmers. I walked the coastline every day. I sat in my garden and read books. I just revelled in it. I thought it was brilliant. I'm finding it a bit more challenging now that everything is starting up again and there's choices. Where do I go for a walk? Do I do this? Do I do that? Where do I go on holiday next summer? It was so much easier when I was on my retreat and everything was on my doorstep.
My mum died 3 months before the first lockdown. She'd had a major stroke 2 years previously and had to move into a care home. The first few months after her stroke were endless visits to the hospital in Edinburgh, 30 miles from my home, which at the time was Dunbar. The first 2 months were a time of dread when no one was sure if she would make it, but she did. However, while her cognition healed and sharpened, her body refused to do the same. I became her carer, driving 60 miles in a day to her care home and back to take her out shopping or to a medical or other appointment or to her exercise after stroke class, constantly worrying about her as she fought depression, trapped in her semi-working body in her single room in a forced-on-her new address with zero privacy. I was also working and parenting 2 adopted children who had their own needs. Life was exhausting. Then Mum died suddenly, right at the end of 2019, completely unexpectedly. 2020 did not begin well. So I entered lockdown a little bit broken and exhausted and was dragging myself through each day. The initial 3 weeks seemed like an eternity. While life stopped for so many people, it didn't stop for me though, with 2 reluctant teens studying from home and an academic husband working long hours out of our wee study. I really felt for those holed up in flats in towns, and I envied people on furlough. I had the role of full-time unpaid housekeeper / teacher / support worker with some freelance work thrown in. It felt like there was no room physically or mentally to grieve my mum. I craved the isolation that others were finding so hard. Although our house was a busy place, the pace overall became slower. And actually, having my husband and kids around 24/7 came with more pluses than minuses. Not having to get up as early in the mornings, not being the taxi for the kids' evening activities, and sharing more time, more meals, more laughter together. Dog walking with my husband on local wide empty beaches that had once been full of day trippers became a salvation. Slowly, I began to feel I could breathe. Occasionally, there was valuable time to chat with neighbours, safely distancing at opposing ends of each other's front paths as we carefully exchanged eggs or flour. As 3 weeks slowly became 3 months, I relaxed into things. I still yearned for time on my own, but I felt that I had been granted some precious slower time. Spring and summer were glorious, and I left that first lockdown in a slightly better place than I had entered it. As the pandemic progressed, winter fell on us and we entered the second lockdown. Homeschool, home working, home was everything. Small things became big things. In this new life, an hour or 2 in the house by myself was worthy of a post on social media. Sunday afternoons became long, often themed Sunday dinners, homemade afternoon teas, Chinese takeaways, 70s afternoons, anything to disrupt the monotony. This one was harder. I watched my kids' mental health deteriorate as they struggled with the lack of socialising, aware that my own was preserved by their very presence. The yearning for alone time was fading, and I joked about becoming institutionalised. Then at last, we were allowed neighbours in the garden, and we found the occasional social sanctuary wrapped in blankets, doused in Prosecco. Just before this lockdown, at the very end of 2020, we saw a house in Shetland. We'd been aiming to make that move before my mum's stroke, but it was obviously just not the time. We asked for measurements and video tours and studied them over and over. We could see it needed a lot of work, but it represented a new and different life. It represented hope. Towards the end of April, as travel restrictions finally eased, we were able to jump on a ferry and view the house, and in due course we were lucky enough to bid successfully on it. Finding work followed. Things slotted into place with surprising ease, and we moved towards the end of summer. So now, we're here. COVID restrictions have, of course, followed us to our new location. We are a long way from a different life. But my kids' mental health is so much better. My husband has a new and so far fulfilling job, and I am freelancing and painting. The views, both physically and metaphorically, are much wider. We're closer as a family. The pandemic has been a journey for us all.
So my experiences of lockdown and life in Shetland. I came to Shetland just before lockdown and lost my job as a result of it. At the time I was with somebody, that didn't work out, and then things didn't go quite so well. I moved into Lerwick, but with lockdown nobody's really interested in engaging with you socially. There were no real public events, well, there were no public events being held. I was just out for walks and trying to talk to people and trying to get some sort of engagement, but it wasn't happening. Only since in the last 6 to 9 months, the Whale Watch group started up, which wasn't as forthcoming with social contacts as I'd hoped. Then I volunteered with the RVS as well. That was a little better. I was able to help out at the Islesborough Centre. Really, the main focus of my the main focus of my difficulties during the lockdown have been the lack of social contact. I very much miss being around people, and especially being on my own in the evenings. It's not something I'm used to, and I am struggling with it. It's now better that I'm getting out and about during the day with my job, and also on Saturdays I help out at the park run, which is very good. I quite enjoy that. But the almost drying up of any human contact during the lockdown has tested me at times. But hopefully I'm through all that now and having a much more stable time, and I suppose lowered my expectations and being grateful for what I've got. But I know that wouldn't necessarily be everybody's desire.
Inside out. On the outside looking to an inside world, then suddenly the whole world was on the outside looking in. Everyone feeling like an outsider, everyone feeling isolated, metaphorically as well as physically. Everyday things took on different meanings, no more just popping to the shops or seeing friends and family usually in Larraconny way. Ferries reduced and loved ones felt further away. But then the isolation made us think and innovate. Software that we hadn't heard of before suddenly became everyday vocabulary. A whole island pulling together to help the community, some going considerably out their way. Made us think more like a community than maybe in the past, even though there were a few grumbles about the use of masks. Now, slowly, we're getting back to where we were. But should we go fully back? Things may change. Working from home might be better for some. Others craving the bustling working environment that motivates them, feeling the luxury of being able to see loved ones in the flesh, but also missing the online quiz nights that brought more of the family together at the one time. We need to look to one another, to all look to one another, keeping some of those things that made us realise what actually matters in life going. Maybe try and simplify life more, or inject more fun where there wasn't before. Some things still seem uncertain, but when things get bad, humanity is a constant.
When I last raised my golden head, I sensed a terrible storm approaching from the east. I watched it frighten you as it loomed closer. At the close of that spring, I, with you, hunkered down, slept a lot, stored my food and energy for bleaker times ahead. My heart slowed to just a murmur, just for the essentials, just to stay alive. I stored and replayed memories, yearnings, grief, Things I wanted and couldn't have teased me. Conversations, laughs, embraces. This year, I awoke to see the storm fading. I saw your face and the new lines etched there, marks of a story you can't tell. I find the sun clutching at it, pulling it close, not wanting to let go. I gaze into it deeply, desperate to absorb the love and reflect the glory. Though rooted in the same earth, this year I'm changed, new, more glorious. I'm radiating a new hope, a new day, a new way.